Hi, this is Dr. Calgo. I want to go over how you collect your IR spectrum this week from your sample. This week we're doing clove oil. Last week we did banana oil and I hadn't had this prepared in time. So I wanted to give you a quick overview, something you can look at while you do the technique on your phone or on the computer next to the IR. Okay, this is the instrument. This is the IR spectrophotometer. It's the computer that we use with it. You'll actually notice that there's two of these devices on the bench. This is in the back room in S235. When you do your printing, your prints will come out on this printer here. It's a slow printer, so just be patient. Don't print it over and over again. If it doesn't come out the first time you print it, don't keep just printing it. Here are the key components of the actual instrument itself. We have a sample compartment. You lift the compartment open at this door here. The device is actually locked in place in the back. You don't have to unlock it in order to open this door. That just keeps the whole unit here from coming out. You'll also want to be familiar with this control panel, as it has a number of things in it that allow you to actually run the instrument. So when you walk up to the computer, what you'll do is you'll look for this program, and it's called Oring. Okay, now Oring, when you double click it to start it, if it isn't already started, it'll come up with this panel. This Smart Omni transmission accessory is the one you want, and you just press OK. The next thing you have to do is prepare to collect your sample. Now, when you prepare to collect a sample, the first thing you have to do is find the KBR pellets that we are using for this experiment. Those will be in a little area to the left of the spectrophotometer. And when you open up these little boxes, you may or may not find these little white capsules on the inside. If you open those up and you look at them, this is what you'll see. This is actually potassium bromide. And you'll notice how clear it is, and that little shiny bit's a reflection of the light above. When they get wet, they will get cloudy and pitted. So the number one thing that you want to avoid when doing this is getting water in your sample. And then putting that sample on the KBR pellet. That absolutely will ruin them. So the way we do that then is, before you actually run your IR, add some drying agent to your sample. In particular, you can use something like sodium sulfate. The same drying agent we use in the other lab. The other thing to make sure is you understand is these are salt plates, like potassium bromide salt, not table salt. But they'll scratch pretty easily and they crack pretty easily. So you have to handle them very carefully. Handle them just above the surface of the counter and try not holding them up like I did here for this picture so you can see it. Okay, now this is what you're going to do. This is the process. You'll take the plates, and I'll show you some pictures here on how you put them into the pellet holder. You will collect a background on 2 crystals, and for this experiment, if you have a solid sample, then what you end up doing is dissolving the solid in a solvent, non-aqueous solvent, and you evaporate the solvent solution on the crystals to get a thin film. It's known as a thin film IR. The next thing you'll do is, after you collect the backgrounds, you add the samples, you collect the spectra of the samples, then you clean the plates for the next user and put them away. Let the next person get them out. Please do not leave them out between experiments thinking somebody's going to come right away, because often what happens is they just sit out in the air and they absorb moisture from the air and they get cloudy. So let's go over what you do when you do a liquid sample. That's what we'll be doing this week. Okay, this is to collect a background. You put both crystals in the sample holder. So there's actually 2 crystals, although you can't see it here. On top of the crystals, you're going to put a ring on top of these. You'll see this when you take it apart. That metal ring keeps the crystals from falling out. But you'll notice what I did is I left a small gap in here so that the pellets aren't pressed by the piece of metal. If you push that piece of metal down, it can actually crack the 2 pellets that are in there. So that's why I say keep a small space in between. If it rattles around a little bit, that's fine. If it doesn't come off, if the cap doesn't come off easily, you can get some glycerin and you lubricate the O-ring that's right here. The glycerin should be found in the lab somewhere. If not, I will pick it up for you and give it to you, okay? So with the 2 pellets inside and with the sample cover on, you put the pellets in the instrument. This is the sample chamber. And then you press background, and on the computer screen it'll ask you if you want to collect a background. Just press OK. And what you should see is something that looks like this on your screen. It's a kind of an ugly signal, but this is up at the top is 100% transmittance. At the bottom is 0% transmittance. This means the infrared light that's running through the sample is absorbed very strongly here and almost not at all over here. What you're seeing in this signal is the IR spectrum of the laser that's being used to generate the IR signal, as well as the absorbance of the infrared signal by components of the atmosphere and the KBR pellet. It's going to ask you in the next step if you want to keep it. You don't really have to keep it. It stores it regardless of whether or not you keep it. Sometimes it's nice to keep it, but more often than not it's just a nuisance on the screen. So to add the sample, you sort of go backwards. You take the lid off the KBR pellets. You take one of the pellets out, and then you put about this much sample on the plate. That's actually half a drop. You can touch that very gently to the plate and it will make a very small drop on the surface. A full drop is often too much sample to actually get a good infrared spectrum on. The next thing you do is you place the other pellet, the one that you took out, back on top, put the sample holder back on, and then place it back into the instrument. And then you press the button that says sample. It's going to come up with this screen, and you can actually type whatever you want into that space, pressing that button, and then it'll run the spectrum, and then it'll say, do you want to keep? And this time you will click yes. So this is actually a infrared spectrum of a ketone, and we'll talk about this more in class, but this is the infrared absorbance of the ketone. Now, once you've done that, there's a couple of things that you'll want to do, and I'm just going to highlight them here. First, you want to be able to find peaks. So if you look here, there's Control K. Control K will actually allow you to find peaks in your spectrum. There's also library setup, which is very helpful, and then you can do a library search to try to identify the compound from the library. These are a little bit more advanced, but often very useful in establishing how well your infrared spectrum fits with the infrared spectrum that is in our library. So to select the proper library, all you need to do is click that option, highlight all the libraries that are given, and then click Add. The highlight, you click at the top one, you hit Shift, you scroll all the way down, you click on the last one, and you add them over to the other screen, and you should see something that looks like that. The next thing that you can do is you'll see there's a search button. You can search the library, or from this screen you can actually just hit Control L or do search from this screen as well. Now for the cleanup, take the pellets out. Don't let them drop to the counter, they will break. So catch them in your hand. Remove the crystals. They're going to actually be stuck together, so it's easiest if you slide them apart and then clean them gently with methylene chloride. The methylene chloride will be found in the counter in this bottle, and there will be there'll be boxes of tissues there known as Kim wipes. Spray a little methylene chloride on the Kim wipe, gently wipe the crystals, put them back into their containers, seal it up, and then put them away in their bins. This bin is for the KBR pellets. So I hope that helped. That's a quick overview on how to collect your IR spectrum. You can also do peak find. So what I would suggest that you do in this particular experiment is make sure that you set up the library and search. And look for the percent match and record that value. Finally, just one last note on backgrounds. You only need to collect a background about every 30 minutes. So don't feel like if the person before you collected a background that you have to collect one. It will actually tell you when an inappropriate amount of time has passed by and ask you if you want to collect a background. So always check to make sure that it's not going to ask you to collect the background before you collect your sample.